and welcome to the Disability Connection. I'm your host, Barbara L'Italian. I'm the Executive Director of the Disability Law Center. The Disability Connection is produced by the Disability Law Center. We are the protection and advocacy agency for Massachusetts, and we're part of a national network of disability rights agencies investigating abuse and neglect and providing legal representation and other advocacy services to people with disabilities. The DLC website is www.dlc-ma.org. Today, I am joined by Brianna Zimmerman, the Disability Law Center's voting rights advocate. Hello, Brianna.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Brianna, can you tell us a little bit about your role at the Disability Law Center?
Yeah, so as the voting rights advocate at Disability Law Center, I make sure that voting is accessible to people with disabilities across the whole state of Massachusetts. So I do things like helping people register to vote, making sure polling places are accessible, and I educate voters with disabilities about their rights.
Could you tell us how this is funded?
Yeah, so DLC receives protection and advocacy for voting access, otherwise known as PAVA funding from the federal government to make sure that people can with disabilities can participate equally in the electoral process. We also help to run the Rev Up Massachusetts Coalition, which I'll mention a little bit more later, but we also receive a little bit of funding from the American Association of People with Disabilities for that.
Great. What is the next election that we should be aware of?
So across Massachusetts, there's going to be a state primary on September 1st.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, what is a primary election?
Yeah, so primary elections are used to narrow down the number of candidates before a bigger general election. So in our state primary, voters narrow down Democratic and Republican Party candidates to choose who's going to run in the general election in November.
Okay. And for today's purposes, we're just going to really talk about primaries, right? We'll talk about the general election at a later date.
Sure.
So could you tell us how primaries work for voters who are not Democrats or not Republicans?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that if you're unenrolled or an independent voter or a third party voter that you can't vote, but that's not true. You can still vote in the primary. However, you do need to choose whether you'll vote in the Democratic or Republican primary. So each party has separate ballots, so you can't vote in both parties' primaries, but you would have to choose one.
Okay, great. And so could you give us a sense of when people need to register by to be able to vote for the primary?
In Massachusetts, people always need to register to vote at least 10 days before any election. So the voter registration deadline for the September 1st election is going to be August 22nd.
Okay. And of course, as soon as people hear this podcast, they could register to vote. They don't have to wait till the last minute. In fact, earlier might be preferable, correct?
Definitely, we recommend people register to vote as soon as possible, for sure.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how people register to vote?
So there's a few different ways to register or check your voter registration status. You can do that online, by mail, or in person. And you should always check first to make sure that you're registered. Sometimes people don't realize that they're registered, or they don't realize that their registration information is out of date. So, for example, you'll want to make sure like information such as your address, your name, your political party are all up to date.
Great. Brianna, could you tell us what the online registration process looks like?
Yeah, so registering online is super easy. You can visit www.sec.state.ma.us/OVR to check your registration information online and also to register online. However, you should know that you can only register online if you have a state ID that's issued by the Registry of Motor Vehicles or RMV. So, for example, if you have a learner's permit, driver's license, or state ID that is current, then you can register online. Anyone can check their registration information online. It's just that you need that form of ID to register online.
Okay. And could you also explain how you register by mail?
So you can register by mail by printing out a voter registration form from the Secretary of State's website, and you'll send it by mail to your local election office. You'll just want to make sure that your voter registration form is postmarked by the voter registration deadline. So, as I said, August 22nd for this primary.
And I assume you would print it out using that same website you mentioned earlier, the Secretary of State website.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. What about if you want to go register in person? Where would you go to do that?
So you have a couple different options. You can register in person at your local election office, and this might be called different things depending on your city or town. So you might know this as a town clerk, a city clerk, or an elections commission or department. You can also register at one of the Secretary of State's regional offices if that's more convenient.
Could you let us know where those Secretary of State offices are located?
Yes, the Secretary of State has offices in Boston, Springfield, and Fall River. So people can choose one of those locations if it's more convenient than their local election offices.
Great, thank you. And I assume that's also on the Secretary of State's website, the locations.
Correct.
Great.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
very good. Okay, so who will we be voting for in this year's statewide elections?
So there are a lot of positions up for election this year. We're going to elect our congresspeople, statewide positions like governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, and auditor. We'll also elect our state legislators and some various county and local election officials as well.
Okay. And there are some contested races, I understand. So could you explain what a contested race is?
Yes, so a contested race means there's multiple people competing for a position. So right now, in the Democratic Party primary, there are two candidates competing for U.S. Senator. In the Republican Party primary, there are two candidates competing for governor. And depending on where you live, you might also have multiple people running for U.S. Representative, state senator, state representative, governor's council, district attorney, and other county and local positions.
Right. Sometimes people get confused about this. Can you explain what members of Congress do?
Yeah, so our Congress people represent us in the US Senate and House in Washington, D.C. We have US senators that represent all of Massachusetts, and we also have a congressman or congresswoman in the US House that represents people in different regions. And those regions are also called districts. So Congress people make our laws and decide where federal resources go, so it's a very important position.
Right. I mentioned that they're confused because in a previous life, I served in the Massachusetts state legislature, and people would think I was in Washington, D.C., but that's not the case. Members of Congress go to Washington, D.C.
Right.
Okay. Could you let us know what governors do?
So a governor has a lot of important responsibilities on the state level. The governor helps to prepare our yearly budget. They decide how resources on the state level are allocated. They also appoint heads of departments, decide policy, and play a role in accepting or vetoing, also known as rejecting bills that have been passed by our state legislators.
Very good. Why don't you explain what a state legislator does?
So, a state legislator helps to pass new laws on the state level. There are 40 state senators and 160 state representatives. So, a lot more representatives than there are senators. They all represent specific regions in the state house in Boston, and senators have a larger region that they represent.
Right. So no matter where you live in Massachusetts, you have both a state representative and a state senator.
Right.
So how can people learn more about what and who they are voting for?
You can visit the Secretary of State's website to find more information about upcoming elections and find out what's on your ballot. Your town or city election office can also be a good resource. They should also be posting information about what is going to be on your ballot. They might post sample ballots as well. You can also visit vote411.org. That's also a good resource for making an informed decision.
Great. And I think beyond the primary, there'll be a large number of ballot questions in November, but we'll address that in a future podcast.
Yes.
Oftentimes, there are candidate forums. Could you explain a little bit about what a candidate forum is?
Yeah, candidate forums involve candidates answering questions about their policy priorities and what they feel is important. And this is a really good way to get to know your candidates and make an informed choice. So there are different organizations that run candidate forums, like the League of Women Voters, and different disability organizations also hold candidate forums. Historically, we've seen Dignity Alliance Massachusetts, the ARC of Massachusetts, and some independent living centers hold candidate forums. And Rev Up Massachusetts is going to be keeping track of those different forums. So sign up for our email list at www.revupma.org to learn more.
Great. What are some of the different ways that people can vote?
You can vote in person on election day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., or you can vote early. You can check with your local election office for your early voting hours and locations. And of course, you can also vote by mail.
So tell us a little bit about how voting by mail works.
So you'll need to fill out an application for vote by mail ballot online at the Secretary of State's office, or you can also print and mail the application at the Secretary of State's website. You can also go in person if you want to your city election office for help. Um, Keep in mind, you do need to apply to vote by mail yearly. So a lot of people forget that they need to do it every year. And you should apply early. The U.S. Postal Service recommends applying 2 to 3 weeks before Election Day so that you receive your ballot in time.
Okay. Is there another voting option for people with disabilities?
Yes, if you have a disability that makes it hard to mark a ballot by yourself, you can vote accessibly online. So in Massachusetts, we actually have a secure, accessible vote by mail system, and that allows you to mark and return your ballot online. And it is screen reader accessible. And if you need to use an online ballot because you have a disability, just make sure you select the option on your vote by mail application that says you need an accessible ballot.
Okay. What should people with disabilities know about our voting rights when voting in person?
So you have the right to an accessible polling place according to state and federal laws and regulations. And you have the right to vote privately and independently. So this means that early voting locations and voting day polling locations should all be accessible.
Great. And when you say polling places are accessible, what does that mean exactly in terms of the outside of the polling place?
So outside of polling places should be accessible, meaning that they have accessible parking spaces that are clearly marked by signs. Sometimes parking spaces are marked temporarily by cones as well. And accessible parking spaces should also be marked by paint. There should also be an accessible path of travel, such as walkways, sidewalks, and parking lots. All of those paths of travel should be level or relatively flat and well lit, and signs should always direct voters to the accessible entrance.
So, what would accessibility look like on the inside of a polling place?
So we want to look for doorways that are wide enough and level to accommodate people using different mobility devices like wheelchairs or walkers. There should be enough space inside the polling place for people using mobility devices as well. So you don't want too narrow of a path of travel inside either. There should also be at least one booth for marking paper ballots that should be accessible. So that means it should be low enough to the ground that voters who are seated, such as people using wheelchairs, walkers, or people sitting in chairs, can reach the writing surface and can fit underneath.
What kind of machines can be used to help people vote, particularly those that have a hard time reading or filling out their ballot?
In Massachusetts, we have a machine called the Automark, which is a machine that helps you fill out your ballot. At least one Automark should be available at your polling place. The Automark has a touch screen and it displays your ballot. You can select your language, adjust the color and font size of your ballot on the screen, read aloud your ballot using headphones, and make selections using a keypad marked in Braille. This is especially useful for voters who have trouble reading or writing independently, including people who are blind, low vision, or people who have trouble gripping a pen, for example. But anyone can use the AutoMark.
Great. How should that AutoMark machine be set up?
So there should always be a functioning AutoMark machine that's on and ready to be used to cast your vote. So that means it should be plugged in, it should be turned on and ready for voters to use. The AutoMark should also be privately located, meaning it shouldn't face other voters. And headphones should be provided so that the ballot can be read aloud if you need an audio ballot. And the table that the AutoMark sits on should also be accessible to voters, meaning that wheelchair users should be able to fit behind the booth and underneath it, and they shouldn't have to reach too high to mark their ballots. This is often an issue that I've seen in polling places is tables being too low or too high.
Good to know. Can you have someone help you vote?
So poll workers should allow you to bring in a support person to help you vote. So this could be someone like a friend, a family member, a neighbor, a caregiver, etc. However, your helper cannot be your boss or employer or an agent representing your labor union. So that's only if you're a part of a labor union. That is actually a federal law, so that applies across the country. And it's important to know that no one can tell you how to vote either. So poll workers should also be able to help you if you have any questions.
So, what happens if your polling place is not accessible, does not have these things in place?
If your polling place isn't accessible, you have multiple options. So the first one is to speak to the warden of your polling place, also sometimes known as the head of the polling place, and ask for help. You can also reach out to your local election office by phone on election day, and they might be able to resolve the issue quickly, although sometimes on election day they are busy.
So, what happens if someone tries that and that doesn't work?
You can also reach out to the Election Protection Hotline, which is staffed by trained volunteers in every state. You can call or text 866 Our Vote or visit 866ourvote.org. You can also reach the Secretary of State's office by calling 1-800-462-VOTE or emailing elections@sec.state.ma.us.
Are you interested in people sharing with the Disability Law Center if they have had difficult voting experiences?
Definitely. To share your experiences, you can also contact us. Visit our website, www.dlc-ma.org, or call 617-723-8455 Depending on our capacity, we may not be able to help immediately on election day, but it's really important that we know about any voting accessibility issues. This really helps our advocacy work.
And in fact, after the last big election in 2024, didn't you assemble a report sort of listing out our findings at different places around the state?
We did, yes. And so we surveyed lots of different polling places, and we also included some reports of people's experiences with voting, and that was really meaningful and helpful because we want to hear from the voters' perspective as well. So we were able to include people's experiences um, of, having broken automark machines. That does happen sometimes. Um, and so getting your personal experiences is really important for our advocacy work.
Right. And we would never reveal someone's name. We would just explain the issue. So no one needs to worry
Absolutely.
about that. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a pretty important election year. How can people get involved in the work we're doing in getting out the vote and making sure our elections are accessible?
So I mentioned Rev Up Massachusetts a little bit earlier. Disability Law Center helps to coordinate the Rev Up Massachusetts Coalition. We're part of the American Association of People with Disabilities Rev Up campaign to make the disability vote count. And we're always looking for new members. So we are a group of organizations and individuals, including individuals with disabilities and self-advocates, who help people register to vote, educate voters, and advocate for accessible voting processes. So we are looking for volunteers to help people with disabilities in our communities register to vote. And we're also looking for volunteers to survey local polling places to make sure they're accessible. And we'll provide training and information on that. So if you're interested in either of those volunteer opportunities or want to get involved in RevUp, please visit our website and sign up for our email list at www.revupma.org. You can also email us at info@revupma.org.
And as you mentioned earlier, Brianna, uh, registration to vote is something people can do right now. They can help, maybe bring a stack of voter registration forms to summer events that they're going to, or if they have a loved one that's in a nursing home or something like that. So that's sort of an ongoing thing that people can engage in right now to assist others.
Definitely. So anyone can help you register to vote, and you can help anybody register. Um, it's a really fun experience, I think. And so, you can think about some creative ways to get involved.
Well, thank you, Brianna, for joining us and explaining about voting and the upcoming primary election. This show will be available on our website and as a podcast. Please follow us on social media. And to do so, you can go to our website at www.dlc-ma.org for the links. Again, thank you so much, Brianna.
Thank you for having me.